arrived at my daughter's house with my arms full and my heart even fuller. A thermal bag with my famous honey cake, the one that takes 3 hours to make and fills the whole kitchen with warmth. A bottle of red wine I had been saving since January, wrapped in gold tissue paper. And a small wrapped gift for each grandchild because I never arrived anywhere empty-handed. That was simply who I was. That was simply how my mother raised me. It was Christmas Day. My name is Marguerite. I am 67 years old. I am a retired schoolteacher who spent 31 years shaping children into decent human beings. I live alone in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a building on Castleberry Street. I have one son, Daniel. I have 2 grandchildren, twin boys named Leo and Marco, 6 years old with their father's dark eyes and my stubbornness. And I have a daughter-in-law named Cassandra. Cassandra. Where do I even begin with Cassandra? Daniel had invited me to Christmas lunch 3 days before. Not by phone, not in person, by text message. One line, no greeting, no warmth, nothing. Mom, Christmas lunch on the 25th. Come at noon, Daniel. I read it 4 times. I told myself it didn't matter. He was busy. He was always busy now. I replied with a simple asterisk, I'll be there, sweetheart. Love you. He didn't write back. But I pressed down whatever feeling was rising in my chest and I baked that honey cake anyway. I wrapped those gifts anyway. I saved that wine anyway. Because that is what mothers do. We show up. We always show up. I rang the doorbell at 5 minutes to 12. I could hear laughter inside, music, the clink of glasses. The door opened and there was Daniel, my son, my only child, the boy I raised alone after his father left when Daniel was 11 years old, the boy I worked double shifts to send to university, the boy who once told me at his graduation, Mom, everything I am is because of you. He stood in the doorway now, with a glass of sparkling wine, and a smile that didn't quite make it to his eyes. Mom, good you're here, come in. No hug, a brief kiss on the cheek, barely grazing my skin. He turned and walked back inside before I could say a word. I stepped through the door. The apartment smelled of roasted meat and pine. The decorations were beautiful, garlands on the mantelpiece, candles on every surface, a tree in the corner covered in matching gold ornaments. It looked like something from a magazine, perfect and cold in the exact same measure. I turned toward the dining room, and my feet stopped moving. The table was round, draped in a cream linen cloth. 6 chairs, 6 place settings with gold-rimmed plates and crystal glasses that caught the light, folded napkins shaped like swans, a centerpiece of white roses and holly. And every single chair was occupied. Daniel returned to his seat at one side of the table. Cassandra sat at the other, wearing a red dress, her dark hair pinned up, her expression unreadable when she saw me standing in the doorway. Next to Cassandra sat a woman I recognized, Patricia, Cassandra's mother, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair cut sharply at her jaw, pearl earrings, a cashmere sweater in deep burgundy. She was laughing at something. She held her wine glass with the practiced ease of a woman who believed she belonged everywhere she sat. Next to Patricia sat a man I didn't recognize, large, broad-shouldered with a thick gray beard. He nodded at me once, a short formal acknowledgement, then turned back to his plate. And at the end of the table, in 2 little booster seats with bibs already tucked into their collars, were Leo and Marco. My grandsons. Leo saw me first. His face broke into a grin and he lifted both arms. Nana. Cassandra reached over and gently pressed his arms down without looking up from the dish she was spooning. Leo, we're eating. Hands down, please. Leo's smile faded. I stood in the entrance to the dining room with a thermal bag in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other, and a coat on my back and nowhere to put any of it. Not a single person got up. Not one person offered me a chair. Cassandra looked up at me then. She smiled. It was the kind of smile a receptionist gives you before telling you the appointment has been canceled. Marguerite, you made it, how lovely. Her voice was smooth, practiced. It told me nothing and everything all at once. I brought honey cake, I said, and wine. Oh, wonderful. Just leave it in the kitchen. We've already started the first course. I walked toward the kitchen. My legs felt strange beneath me, like I was walking through water. I set the thermal bag on the counter. I set the wine beside it. The kitchen was spotless except for the evidence of a meal already well underway, empty bowls in the sink, a cutting board with herb residue, pots soaking. I stood there for a moment. I breathed. I walked back to the dining room. Daniel, I said quietly, where should I sit? My son looked up. Something flickered across his face, not guilt exactly. Something worse. Something like relief that someone else would answer. He looked at Cassandra. And Cassandra answered. Mom. She always called me Mom. She said it like a word with no meaning attached. We reorganized the seating this year. We wanted it to be more intimate, just the core family, you know. I am the core family, I said. Silence. Cassandra folded her hands in her lap. She had the patient expression of someone explaining something to a person they had already decided was incapable of understanding. Patricia came all the way from Grenville. She hasn't seen the boys in almost 8 months. And Gerald, her partner, this is the first Christmas he's spending with us. We wanted them to feel prioritized. That word. Prioritized. She said it so cleanly, so reasonably, as if priorities were a system she had designed and I simply hadn't made the list. Patricia raised her glass toward Daniel with a warm smile. The food is absolutely divine, darling. You two outdid yourselves. Daniel smiled back at her. It was mostly Cassandra. As always, Patricia laughed softly. Leo was looking at me from his booster seat. His little brow was furrowed with a confusion he couldn't name. He didn't understand why Nana was still standing. He didn't understand why no one was fixing it. Marco had stopped eating. He was watching me too. Cassandra glanced at me one more time. Marguerite, if you want to wait in the sitting room, we can catch up after lunch. It won't be long, maybe an hour. After lunch. Like a waiting room, like an appointment, like I was a visitor who had arrived at an inconvenient time and could be managed. I looked at my son. Daniel did not meet my eyes. He reached for the bread basket and offered it to Gerald. I took one step backward, then another. No one turned around. I walked to the front door. I picked up my handbag from the hook where I had hung it. I took out my phone. And standing in the entrance hall of my son's home, with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifting from the dining room, I made the most important decision of my life. I opened my banking application. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I had expected them to shake. Instead, they moved with the kind of calm that only comes when you have finally, completely, run out of tears to cry before they start. I canceled the automatic transfer of $900 that I sent to Daniel's account every month. The transfer I had been making for 4 years. The transfer he never mentioned and never questioned and never once said thank you for. I canceled the supplementary credit card that was linked to my account and registered in Daniel's name. The card he used for groceries, for petrol, for the boys' school supplies, for things I never asked about because I didn't want to make him feel ashamed. I opened my email. I found the contact for Harrogate Property Management. I composed a message to the property manager, a woman named Susan, who handled the lease for the house Daniel and Cassandra lived in. I typed, Susan, please be advised that I am giving formal notice to terminate my lease guarantee on the property at 14 Fernwood Close, effective at the end of the current rental period. I will be following up with a written letter. Thank you for your time. Marguerite Holloway. I pressed send. Then I opened the door and stepped outside. The street was cold. Christmas lights blinked on the houses up and down the road. A family across the street was loading into a car, children shrieking with excitement, a grandmother in a red coat laughing. I watched them for a moment. Then I started walking. I walked 6 blocks before I sat down. There was a bench at the edge of a small park. The kind of park with an old iron fence and bare winter trees and a stone path that went nowhere in particular. I sat down on the bench and I looked at the sky, and I let everything I had been holding arrive all at once. The cold didn't bother me. I barely felt it. What I felt was arithmetic. $900 a month for 4 years. $43,200. The lease guarantee I had signed when Daniel and Cassandra couldn't qualify on their own income. The one that put my name and my credit and my savings on the line so they could have that beautiful apartment with its garland on the mantelpiece and its matching gold ornaments. The card. The transfers. The wedding 6 years ago, which I paid for almost entirely because Cassandra's parents contributed what they could, which turned out to be a framed photograph and a heartfelt speech. All of it was mine. Every brick of the life they were currently living inside, laughing, eating, raising their glasses to Patricia and Gerald, calling them priorities. And they didn't know. That was the thing that was hardest to hold. They genuinely didn't know because I had never wanted them to feel obligated. I had never wanted Daniel to feel less than. I had done it quietly, in the background, the way I had done everything for 30 years. Showing up, filling the gaps, asking for nothing. And it had cost me my seat at the table. Literally. I sat on that bench until the cold finally reached me. Then I got up and I walked to the bus stop and I went home. That night, the memories arrived the way they always do when you finally stop running from them. Not gently, like a door blown open in a storm. It started 6 years ago. Daniel was 34. He brought Cassandra to meet me on a Sunday in October. She was 31, immaculately dressed, polite in a way that gave nothing away. She worked in marketing for a luxury hotel group. She was composed, ambitious. She had the kind of confidence that fills a room and leaves very little space for anyone else. I noticed, that first afternoon, that she never asked me a single question about myself. But Daniel was happy. Genuinely, visibly happy in a way I hadn't seen since before his father left. And so I told myself that what I noticed didn't matter. That love was not a competition. That what mattered was my son's happiness. "Mom, we're getting married," he told me 3 months later. I cried. I held his face in my hands. I told him everything I had always wanted to tell him about how proud he made me and how much I loved him. Cassandra smiled at me from across the table. A measured smile. The smile of someone watching a performance. The wedding planning began almost immediately. Cassandra's ideas were beautiful and expensive. A venue outside the city, a caterer with a waiting list, flowers imported from the coast. Her mother, Patricia, contributed what she could asterisk and contributed it loudly, with opinions about every element, a kind of invisible currency of presence and authority that she traded expertly. I contributed money, quietly, because Daniel came to me one evening embarrassed and said they were short, that the deposit for the venue was more than expected, that they didn't want to start their marriage in debt. "How much do you need?" He told me. I wrote the check. I spent $22,000 on that wedding. Cassandra never once thanked me directly. She sent a card afterward, signed in both their names, that said, "Thank you for your generous contribution to our special day." Like I was a corporate sponsor. After the wedding, things moved quickly. The apartment, the pregnancy, Daniel's salary, which was decent but not enough for the life Cassandra had decided they would have. And so the monthly transfers began. And the lease guarantee, and the card. And it was always temporary. It was always just until Daniel gets promoted, or just until Cassandra goes back to work full-time asterisk, or just until the boys are in school. The promotions came and went and the transfers didn't stop because I never asked them to, because asking felt like accusing, because every time I heard Leo laugh on the phone or Marco shout asterisk Nana. When I came to visit, I thought, this is what I am paying for, this happiness, these boys. This is where my money goes and it is worth every cent. But a year ago, things began to change. Daniel stopped calling. Not all at once, gradually. The way a light fades when the electricity is slowly cut. 2 calls a week became one. One became every 2 weeks. Then a month would pass and I would be the one to call, and he would answer distracted, half present, always somewhere else in his mind. "Everything's fine, Mom, just busy. I'll call you this weekend." The weekend never came. I stopped arriving unannounced because the first time I did, Cassandra opened the door with an expression so perfectly calibrated between polite and irritated that I understood immediately I was not expected and not entirely welcome. "Marguerite, we're actually in the middle of something. Should have called ahead." I apologized. I stood in my own son's doorway and apologized for coming to see my grandchildren. I started calling before I came. They were often unavailable. The boys were napping. They had plans. Patricia was visiting. Patricia was visiting a great deal, I noticed. There were photographs on Cassandra's social media, lunches out, the boys at a park with Patricia laughing behind them, captions about making memories with family. I was not in any of those photographs. One evening, I called Daniel and he answered on the 3rd ring, already talking to someone else in the background. He told me he'd call back. He didn't. That night, I sat in my apartment in the silence, and I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for months. When did I stop being family? 3 days after Christmas, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Mrs. Holloway, my name is Diane Aikby. I'm an attorney. I specialize in estate and tenancy law. I know this is unexpected. You may not remember me, but we met 12 years ago. You were my son's year 4 teacher. His name is Owen." I went still. Owen Aikby, a quiet boy with enormous eyes and a gift for mathematics, and a stutter that his classmates had sometimes been cruel about. A boy I had stayed after school with twice a week for an entire semester, not because anyone asked me to, but because I could see he needed it. "Of course I remember Owen," I said. "How is he?" A pause, then warmly. "He's a software engineer. He's doing wonderfully. He still talks about you." Something cracked open a little in my chest. "I've been trying to reach you for a while," Diane continued. "I moved cities after Owen finished school and lost your contact. I found you through the teacher's alumni registry. Mrs. Holloway, what you did for my son, the time, the patience, the belief in him, I never properly thanked you. And I've always wanted to. If you ever need anything, legal advice, representation, anything at all, please, I am yours. No fee, no obligation. It would be an honor." I sat in my chair for a long time after that call. "Everything all right, Mrs. Holloway?" Diane had asked near the end, her attorney's ear catching something in my voice. "Things are changing," I said, rather significantly. "I'm here," she said, "for whatever you need." I saved her number. And 3 days later, I called it. I laid every document on Diane's office table. The lease guarantee agreement, signed in my name, with my assets listed as security. 4 years of bank statements, showing the monthly transfers. The credit card agreement, showing the supplementary card, in Daniel's name on my account. The receipts from the wedding. Everything, every piece of paper, every cent accounted for. Diane sat across from me and read through it all without speaking. She was a small woman in her 50s with close-cropped hair and reading glasses, and the particular stillness of someone who had learned to absorb large amounts of difficult information without visibly reacting. When she finished, she took off her glasses. "Mrs. Holloway, you understand that legally, every single one of these instruments is under your control." "Yes." "The lease guarantee can be formally withdrawn with proper notice. The transfers are voluntary payments with no legal obligation. The card is yours. The wedding expenditure is a gift and non-recoverable, but it establishes a documented pattern." "Can I withdraw the lease guarantee?" "You can. Your son and his wife will have to either qualify for the lease on their own income, which, based on what you've told me about the property value, may be difficult, or renegotiate directly with the landlord." "How long does the process take?" "If we begin today, the formal notice will reach the landlord within 48 hours. He will have an obligation to inform the tenants. Legally, They have 30 days. I looked at her steadily. Begin today. Diane held my gaze. Something in her expression shifted. Not pity, recognition. Mrs. Holloway, you taught my son that he was capable when the rest of the world had decided he wasn't. Whatever I can do for you, I will. We began. Part 6, the silence before the storm. The days that followed were strange. I expected Daniel to call almost immediately. I expected Cassandra to notice the card had been canceled and to reach out. But nothing came. 3 days passed, then 5. On the 6th day, I received a text from Daniel. Short, casual in tone, as if nothing at all had happened between us. Hey, Mom, Cassandra says there might be an issue with the card. Something wrong on your end. Can you check? Not even a question mark. I read it once. I put my phone face down on the kitchen table. I made myself a cup of coffee. I drank it looking out the window at the winter sky. I did not reply. The next day, another message, less casual. Mom, the card is definitely not working. Cassandra tried it at the supermarket. Can you please call the bank and sort it out? I did not reply. That evening, Daniel called. I watched his name light up on my screen. I let it ring. He called again an hour later. I let it ring again. He left a voicemail. Mom, I don't know what's going on, but the card situation is becoming a problem. Can you just call me back when you get a chance? Thanks. I deleted the voicemail. Diane called me that same evening. The landlord has been informed. He reached out to Daniel this morning. 2 more times this afternoon. No response from your son's side. He doesn't believe it's real yet, I said. He will. Part 7, the reckoning. Daniel arrived at my apartment on a Thursday morning. I had not invited him. He let himself in using the spare key I had given him years ago for emergencies. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee and my documents organized in a neat folder when I heard the front door open. I did not move. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was wearing work clothes, jacket, and tie, which meant he had come here before the office. That told me something about the level of alarm he had reached. He looked at the folder on the table, then at me. Mom, what is going on? Not a question, a demand wearing the costume of a question. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down, Daniel. He sat down. He put his hands flat on the table. I noticed his jaw was tight. The card is canceled. The landlord is calling us about the lease. He says your name is being removed as guarantor. Can you tell me what this is about? Yes, I said. I can tell you exactly what this is about. I opened the folder. I turned it so the documents faced him. This is the lease guarantee agreement I signed 4 years ago so that you and Cassandra could rent a property you could not qualify for on your combined income. My signature, my credit history, my savings listed as security. Daniel stared at the page. This, I turned to the next document, is 4 years of bank statements. $900 every month transferred to your account. That is $43,200, Daniel. Do you want to tell me what you thought that money was? Did you think it was coming from the bank? Did you think you were simply earning more than you realized? His face had gone very still. He stopped. Did Cassandra know? A longer pause. She knew I had some help from family. From family. I repeated those 2 words slowly and let them sit between us. Some help from family. Mom. $900 a month for 4 years, Daniel. The lease on your home, the card, the wedding. And at Christmas, when I arrived at your door with a honey cake I spent 3 hours making and a bottle of wine I saved all year, I was told there was no seat for me. I was told that the priority was Cassandra's mother. I was left standing in my coat in your dining room while everyone raised their glasses. Daniel's face changed. Something broke through the surface of his control. That wasn't, he exhaled heavily. That wasn't my choice. The seating, that was Cassandra's arrangement. I didn't know you'd be, I thought it was sorted. You didn't know. You were sitting at the table. You watched me walk in. You watched me stand there, and you said nothing. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard in that kitchen. "What do you want me to say, Mom?" "I want you to understand what you allowed. I want you to understand that your silence at that table was a choice. Everything that followed is simply the consequence of that choice." Daniel pressed his hands over his face. For a moment, he looked 11 years old again, sitting across from me at this same table after his father had gone, trying to make sense of something too large for him. I felt the love for him move through me like a wave, enormous, unchanged. And I kept my hands folded on the table. "Mom, we can't pay that rent without the guarantee. We can't qualify on our own. The landlord is already calling if you pull out. Then you will need to find a solution, a cheaper apartment, additional income, a conversation with Cassandra about realities. Just until." "No," my voice was quiet, firm. "There is no more just until. There hasn't been a just until in 4 years. There has only been me, filling every gap and neither of you noticing, and both of you sitting down to Christmas lunch without leaving me a chair." Daniel dropped his hands. His eyes were red. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry, Mom." "I know. Is there anything?" "Right now, no. I need you to sit with this. I need you to feel the weight of it. And then I need you to go home and have an honest conversation with your wife about what your life actually costs and who has actually been paying for it." He stood up slowly. He looked at the folder on the table. He looked at me. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Daniel. I have loved you every day of your life. That is precisely what makes this so painful and precisely why it needed to happen." He left. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after. Then I picked up my phone and I called Deanne. "He came," I said. "How did it go?" "Honestly, that's something. Is it enough?" Deanne was quiet for a moment. "That depends entirely on him, Mrs. Holloway, not on you." Part 8, Patricia. 2 days later, my phone rang with a number I didn't have saved. I answered. "Marguerite." Patricia's voice, smooth and self-assured, with an edge of something carefully sheathed beneath it. "Patricia," I said, "I think we should talk woman to woman. What you're doing to Daniel and Cassandra right now is extraordinary. They have 2 small children. You're pulling the financial rug out from under your own grandchildren." I let her finish. Then I said, "Patricia, where do you live?" A pause. "Grenville, you know that." "How far is that from Daniel's apartment?" "About 4 hours." "And in 4 years, how many times have you visited Leo and Marco?" Silence. "I see photographs of you with them occasionally on social media," I said. "Lovely photographs, but I want to understand something. When Cassandra needed someone to watch the boys so she could work, when Daniel needed help with a deposit, when Leo was in hospital for 3 days at age 2 with a respiratory infection, were you there for any of that?" More silence. "I was, every time, because I live 40 minutes away and I was always the person they called. I am not removing a rug from beneath my grandchildren, Patricia. I am removing myself from an arrangement in which I was used without acknowledgement or gratitude. And I would gently suggest that if Cassandra is in difficulty, she has a mother of her own who might consider stepping in. That is, after all, what mothers do." I heard her intake of breath. "You are not as mild as you seem, Marguerite. I was a teacher for 31 years. I have managed a classroom of 28 8-year-olds. I am not mild at all." I ended the call. I sat back in my chair. And I felt, for the first time in a very long time, completely like myself. Part 9, the legal matter. Cassandra filed a complaint. Diane called me on a gray Wednesday morning to inform me. Not a lawsuit, not exactly, more of a formal grievance through a tenancy mediation service, claiming that I had withdrawn the lease guarantee without adequate notice, and that this constituted a failure of a moral and verbal agreement to support the family. "Moral and verbal," I repeated. "Yes, she's arguing that you made an implicit long-term commitment." "Is there any legal foundation for that?" "None," A verbal agreement to voluntarily provide financial support has no legal standing, particularly when the written lease guarantee itself contains the standard termination provisions you followed to the letter. She has no case, Mrs. Holloway, but she can cause noise. Let her make noise, I said. Present everything. The mediation hearing was brief. Diane was prepared, thorough, and quietly devastating. She laid out every document, every transfer, every receipt, the full accounting of what I had given and when and how much. The mediator, a woman in her 60s who had the expression of someone who had seen every possible human configuration of grievance and folly, listened to everything. Then she looked at Cassandra and said, "The documentation shows that your mother-in-law voluntarily supported your household to the total of what appears to be well over $60,000 across multiple instruments, all in her name, all revocable at her discretion. There is no legal obligation here. There is no case." Cassandra looked at the table. "What I would strongly recommend," the mediator continued, "is that you and your husband have a very honest conversation about the structure of your finances and what a life that you can actually sustain on your own looks like." It was over in 40 minutes. In the car afterward, Diane said, "How do you feel?" "Empty," I said honestly, "and clear. Those two things can exist at the same time." "Yes," I said, "I'm finding that out." Part 10. What grows in the silence? 3 months passed. Daniel called me in late March. His voice was different, quieter, as if something had been deflated in him and what remained was more genuine than what had been there before. "We found an apartment," he said. "Smaller, in Edgewood. It's affordable on our actual income. Cassandra is going back to work full-time. We found a childminder." "I'm glad," I said. "Mom," he stopped, started again. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about Christmas, about the years before Christmas, about all of it." "Daniel, you don't have to." "I want to, I need to," he exhaled. "I knew, Mom, about the money, about most of it. Not all the specifics, but I knew you were helping more than you should have been. And I let it happen because it was easy and because Cassandra didn't ask questions and because, and this is the part I'm most ashamed of, because I let her set the terms of everything, including you." I closed my eyes. "She never disliked you," he said. She's very focused on what she wants and she wanted her mother to be primary and I never told her that wasn't acceptable. That was my failure, not hers alone, mine." "Yes," I said, "it was." Is there any possibility that we start over? Not go back. I don't want to go back to how it was. I mean actually start over. Differently." The silence stretched between us, long and careful. "Ask me again in a few months," I said. "Let me see what differently looks like." "Okay." "And Daniel, I want to see the boys." "Of course. Whenever you want, come this Sunday, come for the afternoon." I went that Sunday. Cassandra was there. We were polite with each other in the careful way of people who have broken something and are deciding together, wordlessly, whether it is worth the effort of repair. Leo climbed into my lap within minutes and showed me a drawing he had made of a dinosaur fighting a spaceship. Marco fell asleep against my arm at 4 o'clock. I sat in that small apartment in Edgewood with my grandchildren warm against me, and I felt the particular, complicated piece of a woman who has walked through something difficult and arrived. Not where she started, never where she started, but somewhere real. Epilogue, who I am now. It is June. I sit at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and the early light coming through the window, and I try to account for everything that has happened since last December. Since the moment I stood in my son's doorway with a honey cake and a bottle of wine and nowhere to sit. I am 67 years old. I am a retired teacher who spent 31 years pouring herself into other people's children and 34 years pouring herself into her own. I live alone. My apartment is small and full of books and quiet and mine. I see Leo and Marco most Sundays. Sometimes Daniel brings them. Sometimes, recently, Cassandra does. She sits in my kitchen and drinks the tea I make and says very little, but she comes. That, I have decided, is a form of something. I don't know yet if it becomes more than that. I am no longer in a hurry to know. Patricia has not called again. Diane and I have dinner every few months. She tells me Owen is well. Last month he sent me a card. It said simply, "I heard you had a hard year. I hope you're okay. I never forgot what you did for me. Owen." I keep it on my refrigerator. If I could walk back to that Christmas morning, to that moment in the kitchen when I hung up my coat and picked up my thermal bag and told myself it would be fine, told myself I just needed to arrive and everything would settle into warmth, I would not tell myself not to go. I would tell myself to go exactly as I did, to bring the cake, to bring the wine, to ring the doorbell, to walk into that dining room and see the full table and feel the floor tilt beneath me. Because I needed to see it, clearly, without the softening of hope. I needed to see that the place I had been holding for myself all those years, the place of loving mother, of present grandmother, of indispensable foundation, had been quietly, gradually reassigned. And I needed to decide what to do with that knowledge. I decided to stop being invisible. I decided to stop funding a version of my son's life that had no room for me in it. I decided that love without limit is not love. It is erosion. It wears away the shape of you until there is nothing left to give and no one left to receive it. I am not the woman I was last December. She was patient in ways that were really just fear. She was giving in ways that were really just bargaining. She was present in ways that were really just a refusal to see. I am something else now. I am a woman who set her honey cake on the counter and walked back out the door and started the long, hard, necessary work of deciding what she was worth. My name is Marguerite Holloway. I am 67 years old. I am nobody's footnote. And I am only beginning.